This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Thanks for coming to our presentation. This is the core competencies for hydropower practitioners presentation at the River Management Symposium 2023. Let's see. My name is Angel Valenzuela. I am a fellow with the National Park Service and the Hydropower Assistance Program. And these are my team members. I'll pass it over to Risa so she can introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Risa Shimoda. I'm the Executive Director of the River Management Society and pleased to be here. Thanks for joining us.
And hi, I'm Susan Roseborough, and I work with the National Park Service, and I'm our Hydropower team lead. So I work for our national office, and I'm based in Seattle. Thanks for joining us.
Great, yeah, thanks for joining, everyone. Along with us three, we have a couple of other team members, including Angie Furman from RMS, and she's a training coordinator, as well as Krista Sherwood, National Program Manager from the National Park Service, and also Kevin Lewis, an experienced worker with the Hydropower Assistance Program. Great. And moving on, so we have a little bit of an energizer question for everyone. So we wanted to ask who has been involved in a relicensing with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and how did you learn about this process? Um, and for those that haven't gone through, just take some time to think about the last time you learned something new and how you got started. Now, obviously, because this is a recording, um, we're going to go ahead and share about our experiences with the FERC process. And if you would like to share or maybe have something to add, please feel free to reach out to us. But I'll let Risa go ahead and share a little bit about her process with the FERC licensing.
Right. My introduction was as a volunteer. I was very involved in, I've been a couple of years very involved in kayaking, just personally, and really enjoying the sport, and met others through that process, including a couple people who were volunteers for AW and getting very involved, actually intervening in many relicensing projects in the mid 80s. And I was in Atlanta, Georgia. I was the brand manager of New Coke, but I was just volunteering and got very involved in several different relicensing and learned a lot about many rivers in the southeast and east. Susan?
Yeah, that's great to hear about your beginning, Risa. And yeah, I've been working with the Park Service for uh, over 20 years now, which is hard to believe. But I learned about it just through the job. I did not know about the process, but a big part of my job was this, as well as working for the Rivers Trails Conservation Assistance Program. And um, so it was all brand new to me. I had a person that was working with me for the first year, which was super helpful, and other people across the country that I learned from, and also, state colleagues, other people, just by going to all these processes, learning. And yeah, I feel like I'm still learning new things. So it's been a big process of how to learn it, and definitely, learning by, oh, I didn't know that, and kind of trial and error in some ways.
Great, yeah, thanks for sharing, Susan. Yeah, with me, I am a fellow with the MPS, so I'm just starting with this process and learning a little bit about FERC, and how we can get hydropower projects licensed. And just stepping into this for the past few months, I can definitely already tell how this process can be very complex, very lengthy, and a lot of the times not very well understood because there's a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge and a lot of specific expertise behind it. And that's kind of one of the biggest reasons behind our project. And I'll go ahead and move on to the next slide and let Risa tell you a little bit more about it.
So as you can probably tell, this is a partnership, terrific partnership between the National Park Service and the organization I work with, the River Management Society. And we're aiming to develop a brand new toolkit but identifying core competencies necessary for practitioners and others to effectively engage in this process. That can be daunting. And the end of it, we will provide what we collect and kind of get organized as training materials and resources for achieving the core competencies so that you or other colleagues or volunteers would feel comfortable sitting at the table in one of these potentially daunting process meetings. And as you see, any documents or anything else about the project, you'll see that our specific goal is to identify the competencies necessary for practitioners, any participants, anyone interested in the various levels of expertise to engage in the process with the menu of trainings and resources that can help you get there. And folks who we're including in our conversations are federal managers, state and local agencies, like local meaning like in the watershed or near the river that a dam is on, tribal government folks, nonprofits and nonprofit organizations, public land and water managers, anyone in the general public who's interested, and additional stakeholders who are maybe charged or asked to volunteer to represent the public trust in one way or another, and all the interest in any kind of federally regulated licensing projects. And what we hope to end out with is a list and a description of these competencies and where they apply, because most are not needed all the time, a guide that links them with what is currently available, and best practices examples that will help tell the story, help you get to the competency you're aiming for. I'm sure we will have a list of gaps because there's some resources that we would like to see available, or maybe we can't find them and maybe they don't exist. And we will, once we gather them and get them organized, we will host them on the website. It might be a couple of websites, and then we'll share the results. So we will do a presentation later this year and hopefully develop some training resources. So this is where we are on this roughly 1 year journey to develop the core competencies. We started talking about it last late spring and early summer, but we got organized in earnest with Susan's leadership and Angel and the rest of the team, trying to identify all those we thought would be helpful as advisors who are going to be with us, have been and will be with us through the process, and then subject matter experts who might come in and out when we need their expertise. Right now we have met, we're sitting at the end of February, towards the end of February, and we have met twice, and so we're continuing to gather resources. We're going to be kind of getting them organized and try to figure out where we want to host them. And then once we get into the summertime, we'll hopefully have something that's refined and share it with everyone who's interested, and then hopefully you can begin to use them.
Great. So I'm going to talk about what is a core competencies. I know when we first started this project, I was kind of scratching my head saying, what exactly does that mean? It's not a term that we use often per se. But essentially what it means is it's the knowledge, skills, and abilities to help you reach and perform a specific job or role or even profession. And in our case, as Risa was describing, we're really looking at this in terms of the knowledge, skills, and abilities to help us navigate the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission or FERC process. And as we'll see in a little bit about the core competencies, some are very specific to that process and are unique to learning about that. And then some are broader and not necessarily just for that process, could be good life skills in general. And our goal is really to have this be for all the people that are involved, from the very newcomers and they're brand new to the process, to folks that may have been around for a while. But like I said at the beginning, I'm always learning, so there's always more to learn. There's always different pieces that you can keep diving more and more into. And we're looking at this, from a range of perspectives of nonprofits, tribes, agencies, all of those different types of roles that people play. So one of the things that we looked at the beginning was just some examples. There's quite a few other folks that are actually developing core competencies and looking at that for different professions and roles. One of which is our sister program with the Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program in the National Park Service, which is the community assistance arm of the National Park Service. And they have 5 core competencies they're looking at. On the screen here is the facilitation one. They have all of theirs are around collaboration, project management, those types of skills that they have. And so it's thinking about what is facilitation, and then what do you need in this specific job to be effective. So that's what theirs are related to. And another one that we drew from was the planning profession. They have a, a number of core competencies related to what you need to be a planner. And you can see here, this one is on communication interaction. And what they did was take that high level, what does that mean? And then break it into different pieces, from presentation skills to communication and facilitation skills, all these different things that can help you with communication and interaction in the profession. And then the last example that I wanted to share that you guys may be familiar with is the river management profession. And this was a partnership with the River Management Society, as well as the Interagency Wild and Scenic River Council, and thinking about what are the skills and abilities and needed for that. And so this has a description of what that core competency is on. This is one of them on planning, river management planning. And then you can see that in the middle, you've got training. So like, what are some options that if you want to learn more about that and build your competencies that you can do? And then the last column has some resources that you can dive into. So these are some of the things that kind of gave us inspiration and hopefully help you give a little more context of like, what does that mean when we say core competency? So as Risa was talking about, we've got a wonderful group of folks that have been helping us, either as project advisors that are with us all the whole time, or as subject matter experts that might come in and help on a specific topic. For instance, the night sky, we have an expert in the Park Service that's going to be helping us with that specific topic. And we have a range of folks from nonprofits, in addition to River Management Society, American Whitewater, and the Hydropower Reform Coalition, which is a collection of nonprofits that does wonderful work in the hydropower industry and has a number of wonderful resources. And then a lot of our agency partners as well, including a number of agencies in the Department of Interior, uh, Bureau of Indian Affairs and Fish and Wildlife Service, and also other agencies like the Forest Service and National Marine Fisheries and Federal Energy Regulatory Commission are all part of our process. And as we'll mention a little bit later, we're also still doing some outreach. So if any of you guys are interested in participating or learning more, definitely feel free to reach out to us. So this is our initial draft of core competencies. As Risa said, we've had a couple meetings with our uh, project team and project advisors and subject matter experts to help identify and refine these. We have 6 of them so far, and I'll go into those a little bit more detail in a minute. But we do have them kind of, I would put them in 2 different buckets, so to speak. The first 3 here are really pretty specific to if you want to be involved in a FERC process. It's about the licensing process, about the types of hydropower projects, what does that mean, the operations and economics, regulations and regulatory roles related to this process, and then others that are broader that would be relevant for a range of professions and jobs and just life skills too, from collaboration, negotiation, environmental justice and equity, and natural cultural recreation resources. And if we're just, okay, thanks, Sanhal. So just to dive into this a little bit more, I know this is a lot of text here, and we're not going to go through it bullet by bullet, but just to give you a little more flavor for what all these mean. The first one, the licensing process, this includes, well, what is FERC's role? And, what does that mean? What is their authorities? What is the process? How does this look like in terms of the planning process and the different processes you use? What are those key steps and how can we get involved? What is that engagement process? And then also what happens after a license is issued and that implementation piece from settlement agreements, if there is one, or just licensing implementation. And then navigating the online world because there's, that whole system as well. And then there's hydropower projects. As I was saying, there's the types of projects, what we might traditionally think about as a hydropower project with a dam and some turbines. Or it could be some of the newer things or less known things like pump storage, where you've got two different lakes or reservoirs and the water's getting pumped back and forth depending on power needs and prices. Or it could be the even newer technology of hydrokinetics that could be in rivers and in the ocean, whether that's buoys or turbines that are producing power without, the need for dams or full blockage. So that learning more about those, learning about the economics, which is certainly really important to the hydropower operators, and different operations that could happen and affect rivers. So all of that kind of is in that category. The regulatory piece, that is thinking about what are the key laws that govern the process and who has different authorities. So certainly FERC has a lot of authorities, but there is some shared decision making in these processes. So who are those other agencies that have those authorities and what are those laws that are relevant there? And then we've got the second set, is important in FERC processes and really is a broader set of knowledge, skills, and abilities that can apply in a range of things. And that includes collaboration and negotiation and, in terms of being able to really articulate what your interests are, be able to build relationships and, be persuasive to be able to help uh, build your case, but also knowing when to collaborate and when to identify those wins and when to kind of back down from some of your interests to get a greater need for everyone. So there's a range of different skills that are in that bucket, which is just a small piece of that is for hydropower, but of course these skills are relevant for everyone. And then our natural, cultural, recreation resources. This is our biggest lumping. It's really got a lot in here. And it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone needs to be an expert in all of these different areas, but certainly if there's an area that's of interest to you personally or your organization that you're representing, you would need to know about that. And one interesting thing about rivers, which I think we probably all know, being a part of the River Management Society conference, is just everything's intertwined. So even if you have an interest, you're a boater and you want to, you're interested in whitewater flows, that is going to affect cultural resources and aquatic resources. So having some knowledge and just recognizing the intertwinedness is important. And some of the key steps here is really thinking about, okay, what's the information that we need to know? Are there any study gaps that we need to fill? And how can these, different resource knowledge help us fill those gaps in those study areas? And then how can we have that information base from the studies and existing information to build solid recommendations to help mitigate the project and develop those protection, mitigation, and enhancement measures that are part of this process. And then the last one we have is environmental justice and equity, and really thinking about how we use the principles of diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility in the hydropower process. Thinking about, what are the different communities that might be affected by the project? How can we collaborate with tribal governments? How can we think about accessibility in terms of, recreation access for everyone? So those are kind of it in a nutshell. And, we do have a link that that is part of this presentation and in the app to just learn more, and definitely feel free to reach out to us as well. Okay, and then our training and resources. And as Risa was saying, we want to have these training and resources as well. So we've got the core competencies, and then it's like, okay, great, we know what these are, but how can we help dive into those a little bit? And so that's what this is about. And so far, we're just really kind of on the beginning stages of this. We started this, in January, and developing these resources, or collecting them, I should say. And we've got over 70 so far. We have quite a few on some of them, not as many on the other ones, and we're still in the process of collecting resources. So if you guys know of any of them, please reach out. It'll probably be something that we'll continue to do over time. And I will just say that the resources range from some things that are very specific, like the picture down here, the first one there on flows and aesthetics. That is on aesthetic resources, so, and flows related to aesthetics, and the study guide, study information, and helps you navigate what type of information you might need and how to study that. Versus the other two that we have pictured here are more general. So the first one is from FERC, and it talks about the hydropower uh, projects and the process at a high level, and gives you just, an overview of that. And then the other one is from the Hydropower Reform Coalition. I think over half, at least over half, if not more, of the resources came from the Hydropower Reform Coalition. They've done a really great job of building a lot of wonderful resources. And this one that we've got pictured here is about the, citizen guide to the licensing process, which is one of the foundational things for those beginners. And not even just beginners. It's just, it's a great resource for everyone. So.
So, as we have been collecting these resources, we have definitely identified big areas that we, like Susan mentioned, have lots of resources that we've come up with pretty easily, and then several that we know we have some work to do. So, collaboration and negotiation. We have some environmental justice, not so much, and then the natural, cultural, recreational resources. We can find a lot more, and so our charge will be both to collect them, kind of organize them, and make sure that they are presented in a way that's really helpful for folks. And we would love your thoughts on this project, on the idea of being competent or have core competencies in the hydropower relicensing process as a beginner or as a practitioner. Because this hasn't been done before, there's no recipe that we're following, and we would just love your ideas. We'll share resources that we have, collected thus far. Feel free to, if you're at the symposium, you will have been able to share in the app that we have, and we'll provide our information at the end, so you can volunteer even question that you think might not have been addressed, or a gap that you might have a resource for. Definitely something, if we've just completely missed it, please let us know.
Great, thanks, Risa and Susan. That was a very good retelling of our project. And one thing we want to talk about too are the lessons that we've been learning while going throughout this project. And something that we realized is how important a cohort of our subject matter experts and project advisors has been, and uh, by having that very thoughtful and very specific inputs. And it also goes back and shows the importance of collaboration between those federal resource agencies and non-governmental organizations, and tribes as well. And that's a very important lesson that we've been learning so far. And another one is kind of being able to provide a tool that is relevant for all of us. And just like I mentioned, there's a lot of people that have already had this idea of a core competencies in the back of their heads. A lot of the resource agencies, NGOs have kind of thought about this. And like we mentioned, HRC is one of them that's been kind of compiling a lot of these resources and trainings. But this is one of the first times where we've been able to get together, collaborate to kind of create something that is concrete and tangible, so that we can provide that beginner entryway, right? Because like, as we mentioned, the FERC process is very lengthy, very complex, and there's a lot of stuff that you just have to learn with experience. And creating this tool where you can go in and pull the specific knowledge that you need, depending on where you are in the process, has been really helpful, and it's really showed us the importance of collaboration. And one of the challenges that we've been facing, specifically with outreach, have been just trying to reach out to tribes, especially because a lot of the projects that are being built and being licensed are on rivers where a lot of tribal entities either live on or nearby. So a lot of these projects do end up affecting tribes. So we want to make sure that we are um, reaching out to them and getting their considerations. And that's something that we've been challenged with a bit, as well as with reaching out to environmental justice communities. Um, because, like I said, like I mentioned, these considerations are very important when some of these projects can affect the communities and the environments surrounding them. So that's something that we want to make sure that we are considering and something that we're giving thought to. But it has been a challenge. So if you have any ideas or any feedback on those, we'd very greatly appreciate it. And one of the last lessons is, as I mentioned, this is something that a lot of people have been thinking about. So there is already a big pool of resources and training. So something we're trying to learn how to do is how to maintain this project, whether it be on the website, like we mentioned earlier, um, but just being able to maintain a database this large, where there's a lot of stakeholders, a lot of participants, and a lot of resources, is something we're trying to learn how to keep it maintained so that it can work for all of us, and so that we can make use of all the work that has been done in the past and create that guide and that menu of resources and trainings that is not only helpful for us right now, but for future practitioners as well. And that is the end of our presentation. So thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. Risa, Susan, if there's anything y'all wanted to add before we go.
No, just thank you for joining us. Thanks, Angel.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. And yeah, feel free to reach out if you want to talk more about this project and your
Yeah,
thoughts.
great. Yeah, we'll have our contact information provided with this recording. Yeah, thank you again.